Subscribe and hit the bell icon and never miss another video. I can just drop the mic and bounce now. This is like the best thing that's happened to me.
It's true.
Hi, this is MissMalini, and I'm very, very thrilled to have in my studio today the one and only Vir Sanghvi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
And it's so wonderful to finally talk to you and meet you because I've admired your work and read all your columns. We're here to talk today about your brand new book, The Game Changers. And when you started off in the introduction, you say success was the new romance. Yeah. Money was the new measure of character. Businessmen were the new heroes. So can you elaborate a little bit?
If you were to look at the India I grew up in, which was a long time before you grew up, there was a stage when we looked up, say, at cricketers, perhaps at film stars, but we never looked up at rich people. We had certain admiration of J.R.D. Tata, but he was not a household face. There was no media. He could walk into a room and you wouldn't notice. If G.D. Birla walked into a room and you were told who he was, you wouldn't care. That's changed now. If Kumar Birla walks into a room, there's suddenly a frisson. If Mukesh Ambani walks into a room, suddenly everybody falls quiet. There's a way in which we admire success and we respect success which wasn't there earlier. There's a danger with that because we respect money and we often don't care too much about how it was made. If I'd written this book, say, 2 years ago, Nirav Modi might have been in it.
So how do you choose the people to profile in this book? It's quite an interesting mixed bag.
Well, it's interesting because the first one, which was called Men of Steel, a title you couldn't give in this day and age, what, 10 years ago?
Yeah, where
had
are the
no
women?
women. Had not one woman. And not one reviewer even commented on the fact that there were no women.
So you talk about social media being a great class leveler.
Yeah.
I was really interested to know, what does that mean?
It means that if I put out a tweet, I usually respond to nearly everything anyone says, unless it's abusive or whatever. And when I respond, I don't really know who I'm responding to. I'm responding to anybody from anywhere. And if the guy is intelligent and carries on a conversation, it's given him access to me and to everybody else on Twitter, and it's given me access to him. So there's a sense in which social media cuts through the whole class barrier. Even when you were growing up, you would have spoken to people who were like you in your field, etc. You wouldn't necessarily have spoken to someone in, say, Imphal or Kohima, who you'd never have met. But with social media, we are one.
We were talking a little bit about success and how people perceive it.
Yeah.
Do you think success can be lonely? I know fame can be lonely, right? Because everyone thinks, oh my God, everybody loves you, you're a celebrity. But I've seen so many celebrities struggle with that. But is success a lonely place?
I think so. I think there's that line from Joni Mitchell from Both Sides Now, which is, now old friends are acting strange. They shake their heads and say, I've changed. I don't know a successful person who doesn't feel like that. Their friends say they're different. People look for ways in which they say they're different. And in many cases, they are different.
And you were talking about Asma Khan. So you've known her for such a long time. Did she say something that you found, wildly different about her that you weren't expecting?
I remember her very slightly. I remember she was bright, but I also remember she was not that forthright. And you talk to her now, and it's not a question of getting her to open up, it's a question of getting her to shut up, because she never stops talking. And that's what I love about her, because you just sit down and it comes spewing out. And if you look at her story, and I don't know how many of you read the book, it's an amazing story. It's a girl who's a journalist in Calcutta, gets an arranged marriage, goes to England, marries an Oxford and Cambridge don, is bored, sets up groups of local women who are living over there, often Muslim women, Nepali women, starts a restaurant. The restaurant becomes a rage, and she's on chef's table. She's the coolest person in food in England. But what she wants to do is to use that fame as a springboard to fight for women's rights, for other issues. She doesn't want it said on her grave, she made a great biryani. She wants it said, she made lives better.
And what I'm loving to see is that you see so much more representation, whether it's in TV shows or films, everywhere, of people who look like us. Do you think that this is also changing the game, and who do you think is going to do it?
I think so. I think one of the people in the book, Sameer Sen, grew up in Bandra, not far from where we are, and grew up in a middle-class family. His father worked for the National Textile Corporation. He talked his way into university in America. He talked his way into Goldman Sachs, and he's now phenomenally private plane rich. but he knows more about wine than any white person I know. He's been to more restaurants. He can hold his own in any rich person's civilization, but we'll still come back to Bandra, we'll still go to Elko Arcade, we'll still have Bhel Puri. So there's a sense in which Indians have kept their roots and yet gone out and conquered the world.
So let's talk a little bit about Karan Johar, because everyone is going to, of course, ask about this. So let's talk about it. So I was really amazed how much he opened up and talked about, and he also, referenced his own book and the things that he talked about. And I have to ask you this question: when you had this conversation with him, did you take away a sense of how he feels today about his sexuality?
I actually thought he was completely comfortable in his own skin. And you have to remember that I've known him for a long time.
Sure.
His father, Yash Johar, was a friend of mine.
Yeah.
I was on the sets of movies they've made. I was at premieres they've made. And he was this, I think he said it himself, slightly awkward fat child.
Yeah.
And nobody thought anything would come of it. And he's made this, and I interviewed him after his first film, and I've been interviewing him since then, many times since then. And what struck me about him is that not only has he come to terms with his shyness, he was quite shy. I think he went for a public speaking course at one stage to get himself to open up. He's come to terms with his sexuality, as he says in the interview. He was a virgin even after he was a hit film director. The first time he had sex, it was with an escort. It was with it was paid sex, and he felt hollow and empty. He keeps falling in love, usually with straight people, in which sense he's like Elton John. But he's come to terms not just with being gay, but he's open about coping with the abuse. He says people come up to him at airports, strangers, and say to him, "So you're homo," something like that. And I mean, how horrible and how disgusting
or
is that?
Or saying, that it's in your book saying that my wife doesn't like you because you're homosexual,
That's
but
right.
I'm okay with
it. I mean, who the F are you to tell him that, right?
That?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to read a little paragraph from this book which actually addresses some of this. Sometimes the questions can come up about homosexuality and with Karan Johar when least expected. A decade ago, I was anchoring a session at the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit with Karan and Saurav Ganguly. We turned to the audience for questions. Most were thoughtful and sensible about how he felt to be a big achievers at such a young age, etc. Then a very senior civil servant at the back of the hall put up his hand. I called on him to ask a question, sure that a man of his eminence would have something substantial to ask. Not much luck. "Tell me, Karan," began the civil servant, "what about all these stories about you and Shah Rukh Khan? Are they true?" I was taken aback, and so I imagine was Karan who tried to frame an appropriate response given that he was at a high-powered summit and the question had been asked by an eminent person. Finally, he fell back on saying that the question was unfair to Shah Rukh, who was clearly heterosexual, was happily married and had 2 children. He now has 3. As Shah Rukh himself had pointed out, Karan responded, "You don't create children with heavy petting. You need to go a little further." The thing I also love is that I could hear everyone's voices. I could hear him saying that the way that you've written it and the style that you've written it. So what made you want to profile Game Changers to begin with?
I don't know. I think India is a society in transition. The India of 10 years ago, after liberalization, after Manmohan Singh, is very different from Mr. Modi's India. And you can write scholarly articles about how India is changing, but I think snapshots of people often give you a better idea of India is changing if you look at it through their eyes.
And would you be able to predict some of the next generation of Game Changers?
It'll be people like you, who I think are already
I totally
game changers.
did that on purpose.
Who I think should have been in the book anyhow. But essentially, I mean, look at your story. You're completely self-made. You're not from Bombay. You come from what, Allahabad, right? You come into Bombay 20 years ago. You walk in and you conquer the city. You conquer social media. You become a phenomenon. You have what, 1 million followers on Instagram? 2 million something on Twitter? You are a household name. If that's not a game changer, who is?
I can just drop the mic and bounce now. This is like the best thing that's happened to me.
It's true.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Really enjoyed the book. And make sure
you
you go and get your copy today.
Thank you.